Sir Keir
Morning.
Starmer has said that Labour aims to boost military spending to 2.5% of GDP, as long as it's achievable within Labour's borrowing rules. So my question to you is, why has he designated this as Labour's #1 priority?
Well, our commitment to the nuclear deterrent is total, and our support for the armed forces is on the record. What we need to make sure is that we're reflecting the changing international circumstances, the growing threats to not only the UK but our allies as well. And that's why we've set out our ambition to get to 2.5% of GDP on defence spending, but also that defence spending should be focused primarily on UK companies creating and supporting jobs across the United Kingdom rather than buying equipment on the international markets from international partners where the jobs clearly go abroad. So setting out a clear commitment to our nuclear deterrent, a clear commitment and direction of travel on defence spending, but also backing our British jobs as well.
OK, so you call it an aspiration and the direction of travel, this 2.5% of GDP on military spending. So that sounds quite vague to me. I mean, how soon could it happen under a Labour government?
Well, the 2.5% commitment matches where the government is on defence spending at the moment, but we can't see in opposition the information that would be required to make that decision to work out when precisely that would kick in. And that's why we've committed to a full defence and security review within the first year of a Labour government that would set out what are the challenges facing the United Kingdom, and importantly then, what are the capabilities that are required to defend the UK and support our allies. We know that there's been a hollowing out and underfunding of our armed forces over the last 14 years. That's the words of Ben Wallace, the former Defence Secretary. And if we do win the next general election, we're going to have to repair that damage, replace those capabilities that we've now lost, and make sure our forces are not only able to deter aggression, but should a war happen, be able to defeat adversaries as well.
But can you commit to the 2.5% by the end of a Labour term were they to win the general election?
Well, the commitment that Keir's making today is 2.5% of GDP when economic circumstances allow. There's the same position that the Conservative government have currently, but they can see the information that's required to make the assessment of threats, and we can't. And so I can't answer that question directly to you because I don't get to see the information, the security briefings, the intelligence that would be required for us to set out clearly which capabilities need to be invested in at what time to deter what threat. But we do know that tensions are rising. The threats from Russia in particular to the United Kingdom and our allies are growing, and maintaining a 2% defence spending is insufficient to guarantee the security of the United Kingdom.
And Sir Keir Starmer is saying that defence is Labour's #1 priority. So is it more important then to a Labour government than schools and hospitals?
Well, I think the answer in politics is always and rather than or. But we do know that.
But if you make something your #1 issue, it does imply that other things are less important.
Well, there's certainly an importance of making sure that our defence spending, our defence and national security picture is secure against rising tensions. We need to make sure that we've got the investment going into our armed forces. But for any voter out there, before they start looking at our health, our education, our environment policies, as important and critical as they are, they want to know that national security and economic security is safe with a Labour government. That's why Rachel Reeves has set out our policies on economic security and growth. And that's why John Healey and Keir Starmer are today setting out policies to increase defence spending when economic conditions allow and renew our nuclear deterrent, guaranteeing jobs not only in Barrow in Cumbria, where the submarines are built, but in the supply chain across the country as well.
You know, when you make an aspiration like the 2.5% of GDP, people are always going to ask you where the money comes from. And that is a very real question, isn't it? What are you going to cut back on spending to spend on defence? Are you going to spend less on pensions, on schools, on hospitals? Where's the money going to come from?
Well, what we've set out as a party is that the only way to reinvest in the country to correct the damage of 14 years is to grow the economy, is to create more growth in our economy. We've seen pretty feeble growth figures today. in that growth comes more tax revenues, and that comes the greater ability to spend on the priorities of a government. Now, against the rising international tensions, we need to make sure our armed forces have the equipment and the capabilities they need to keep us safe. That clearly is the first priority of any government, to keep the country safe. And that's without that security, you can't have a vibrant economy, nor can you have the investment in public services that Labour also wants to see within the first term of a Labour government. And that's why Keir is so clearly setting this out today, being clear that there is an ambition to get to 2.5%, that our support for NATO is unshakable, and that we have total commitment to Britain's independent nuclear deterrent.
But if it is so urgent, don't you need to have answers now about how you're going to find the money to bolster our defences?
Yeah, we've committed to that defence review that will look at what we need to spend in what sequence, and so we can understand.
Yeah, but where's the money going to come from?
Well, first of all, we need to spend the MOD budget they already have better, because the MOD is not known for its wise spending. Then we need to see the growth in the economy that delivers the additional tax revenues that will allow not only the investment in defence, but also the investment across the whole range of public services that have been hollowed out so much under the last 14 years of Conservative government. Really, without that economic growth, you're going to struggle to provide the economic security. And that's why the government's been struggling so much, because they've had such feeble and weak growth. And that's why Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer have set out that growth is our primary economic mission, to make sure that we're getting more people into well-paid jobs, that we're motoring the economy at a faster rate. In that comes more tax revenues that we can spend on the priorities that we have. But securing the safety and security of our country is the first priority for any government, and it will be if Labour's elected at the next general election.
A quick question about Keir Starmer vowing his unshakable commitment to the nuclear deterrent today. There are, though, aren't there, many people in your party who are pretty uncomfortable about Labour spending millions on nuclear weapons. Will everyone in your party be on side for this? Are all the shadow cabinet on side with this?
Yes, there is strong support for the renewal of our nuclear deterrent and the investment in the 4 Dreadnought-class submarines that Keir is also setting out our support for today. I think when you're looking on the screens, on your news bulletins, and you're seeing Russian aggression against Ukraine, where we're seeing daily cyber attacks against the United Kingdom, where we're seeing our allies being threatened internationally, the case for a robust and strong defence policy is set out very clearly in front of us if we just look at it. That's why Labour is today being clear that we want to increase defence spending to 2.5% when conditions allow, and make sure we're addressing the capability gaps that we could be inheriting. You know, we've lost 200 aircraft from the RAF. 1 in 5 Royal Navy ships has been cut or mothballed, and the Army's down to its smallest level since the Napoleonic era. One of the reasons that people in the armed forces and our veterans are turning to Labour is because they've seen the damage that has been done. Now, these are big challenges. This isn't just a political mud-throwing fight. This is about securing our future and our national security for the United Kingdom and our allies that are under more imminent and daily threat, especially when you look at those allies in the Baltic states or NATO's eastern flank that are bordering Russia, seeing the aggression and the confidence that Putin now has to threaten NATO. Well, we can't deter that aggression without a strong commitment to defence and without a strong commitment to our independent nuclear deterrent. And that is what Labour is setting out today. So Putin and anyone that seeks to threaten the United Kingdom and the security of our allies can be determined that Britain will possess an independent nuclear deterrent, that we will be reinforcing our armed forces, and that we will be supporting Ukraine until they win against Russia. Now, these are big challenges, and I'm very glad that Keir is setting out Labour's response to those today and our total commitment to the nuclear deterrent.
We're running out of time, but I very quickly want to ask for your response to an interview I did with the former Defence Minister Tobias Ellwood a little bit earlier. And in that, he said that he suspected that battlefield tactical nuclear weapons would be used by a state or a non-state actor within the next 5 years. Do you agree with him?
Well, I haven't seen any assessment that suggests that. Certainly the proliferation of smaller nuclear devices is something that we are tracking around the world. To be able to deter the use of nuclear weapons, be it strategic nuclear weapons, big intercontinental missiles, or tactical ones, smaller battlefield arms, we're going to need to make sure that we have a set of armed forces, an international alliance that can deter that aggression in the first place. That means preventing those nations that threaten international stability from getting hold of nuclear material, in particular looking at Iran in that case, but making sure that the cost of using any nuclear weapon is so high that no one would want to use one, especially a tactical nuclear weapon. That is really important that we have that strong position. But where Tobias and myself will agree, I think, is that our armed forces have been hollowed out. We do need to see investment in our military. And the best way of winning a war is to deter one in the first place. But hollowed out and underfunded armed forces isn't the way to deter Russian aggression. Having strength on our side and a total commitment to national security to make sure we can defeat an adversary if required is the way to do that.